University of West Georgia's mission is to achieve preeminence in providing educational excellence in a personal environment through an intellectually stimulating and supportive community for its students, faculty, and staff. This statement is founded on principles. It defines what we are and what we hope to become. But we should remember that in every step we take toward this goal, we are dependent on a foundation of safety and security. Risk management, the process of protecting our assets, our operations, and our opportunities, is becoming more and more critical as we move forward to become a destination university. We are also challenged with doing more with less. So it becomes increasingly important to protect what we have and to decrease our losses that consume our time and our energy. This training module was designed and implemented to help us obey the law and fulfill our obligations to the state. But it does much more than that. It helps orient our professional community in the very basics of what everyone who works here should know. It is simply a starting point, an essential first step.
Universities are complex institutions. We not only teach our students, but we house them, we feed them, we structure their social lives, we feed their character, we develop their leadership skills. The University of West Georgia exists for this primary purpose, but has assumed many roles to help accomplish this. We are, among other things, a business, a landowner and neighbor, a state agency, and a resource for our community. And our operations are as diverse as any township. Supporting our academic mission, we have architects and accountants, professors and police officers, carpenters and counselors. Everyone has a unique role, but there is one thing we have in common. We are all members of this community that are contributing to the success of this institution. As you may be aware, the Board of Regents, as well as the state of Georgia, is redefining how we manage risk. Our insurer has mandated that each state agency implement a comprehensive loss control program, or CLCP, which proactively responds to the various risks that we face. One requirement of this program is that every state employee be required to complete a minimum of 3 training classes annually.
The purpose of the initial and annual training is to provide you with general information that not only satisfies our requirements to the state, but also gives you the knowledge that every university employee must know. This information is not new, nor is it unique to this presentation. You may have heard some of this information from various sources before. You will be tested to ensure that you understand the information. This training will provide you with an overview of policy, law, regulations, and practices that will help you reduce risk to the university, as well as your own personal risk. It will also provide you with the parameters of insurance that are in place when you are conducting university business. Let's start with general information. The Department of Human Resources maintains an employee handbook, which can be found online at their website. This handbook provides an overview of general policies and procedures at our institution. It is the employee's responsibility to familiarize him or herself with the contents of this handbook. Topics include employment laws, employee status, evaluations, pay and benefits, and personal conduct. One important thing that you should know is that the handbook is subject to change. Even though Human Resources provides updates through campus mail and other channels, it is still your responsibility to understand the contents of the handbook. There are a few specific topics that need to be addressed. The first is harassment. If you feel that you have been discriminated against or have been the recipient of a form of harassment, it is your responsibility to file a formal complaint with Human Resources. Another topic is the Family Medical Leave Act, or FMLA. The FMLA requires that employers provide job-protected unpaid leave due to a serious health condition that makes the employee unable to perform his or her job, or to care for a sick family member, or to care for a new child, including by birth, adoption, or foster care. Although HR may proactively respond and activate your FMLA entitlement, or your supervisor may act on your behalf, it is your responsibility to notify HR in order that you will be afforded this leave and that your job will be protected. If you'd like to know more about FMLA, a video is available at Human Resources in ACOG Hall.
Risk management is a broad term that simply means to protect or to secure. In a university setting, this includes abiding by all laws, codes, regulations, and ordinance. It means protecting our people, our real property, our assets, and our good name. It also means protecting what we do so we can continue to do it.
First of all, everyone is a risk manager, because as an employee, you are an agent of the state, and you are accountable for what you know. If you notice an unsafe condition, you are responsible for ensuring the concern is either corrected or the information is communicated to someone who can address the issue. Possible corrective actions include notifying your supervisor or submitting a work order. Students and employees are injured every year because someone assumed that it was someone else's job to address an issue. The University of West Georgia has a building manager and building coordinator program, and each occupied building has one of each. The building manager is responsible for building policy and making decisions, while the coordinator is responsible for communication to all building employees. Everyone is encouraged to use this program to address and communicate issues affecting most or all the building occupants. The Risk Management, Environmental Health and Safety Building Manager Program webpage has the most current list of managers and coordinators. If you are aware of a concern that is not facility-related, such as an unsafe practice, your primary means to resolve these issues is to use your chain of command, starting with your supervisor. If you feel your supervisor would not be responsive to your concern, or if your concern is related to your chain of command, you are encouraged to use the other resources on campus, such as the Ombuds Office, Human Resources, University Police, or Risk Management. All supervisors should know that they are completely accountable for the information that is reported to them, and it is up to them to resolve an issue or refer to someone who can. All employees are protected from personal liability when they are doing their job. This is provided to them through the Georgia Tort Claims Act of 1990. Whether you are a professor or a police officer, a lawyer or a landscaper, you should not be afraid to do the work that you do for the university. But there are parameters to this coverage, and every employee needs to be aware of where this protection ends. Essentially, the Tort Claims Act only applies to state employees conducting state business. Let's break this down into two elements. First of all, the law only protects employees. If you ask a student, friend, or family member to assist you with a task, they would not be covered and may be subjected to personal liability, even if they are under your direct supervision. Volunteers may be covered for liability, but only if they are under a structured volunteer program. Secondly, the law only applies to state business, or in our case, university business. In most cases, it's pretty obvious what is, and what is not, university business. It's defined by our mission statement, our departmental goals, and our job descriptions. A general rule of thumb is, if what you're doing supports your organizational objectives, you would be covered. We place ourselves at personal liability risk when we choose to do tasks that are outside the course and scope of our responsibilities. Here's an obvious example. An administrative assistant for a department may pick up an item from a local office supply store. In this case, the secretary would be protected from liability because she is responding to the needs of the department. But if she's asked to pick up lunch for the boss, this does not support organizational objectives and would not be covered. Supervisors should be aware that there is a limit to what they can ask from their employees, lest they put them at personal liability risk. The term other duties as assigned is in fact restricted to other duties as assigned to achieve organizational objectives. If a supervisor assigns a task that does not directly contribute to the goals of the department, division, or institution, the supervisor is not conducting university business and does not have the authority to issue these directives. But the responsibility does not rest solely with the supervisor. All employees have both the right and responsibility to question how an assigned task might help benefit the department or institution.
Now, this does not mean you cannot offer to get someone lunch or help someone's child with their homework or type up a resume or any number of tasks that we do as members of a community. It's just that these tasks benefit an individual and not the department, so they would not be insured.
There are two other instances when a claim might be denied because it was not considered university business. The first is the law. There is nothing that we do as a state agency that would require us to break the law, and we surrender our protection if we do. Every employee has the duty to refrain from assigned illegal, unethical, or inherently unsafe tasks. Remember that everything we do is subordinate to the law. Even our basic rights and privileges, such as free speech and academic freedom, do not extend beyond these parameters. In most cases, it's obvious where the boundaries lie. But this principle also applies to non-criminal statutes, such as intellectual property, privacy, fire codes, public safety, civil rights, environmental compliance, and federal funding, to name a few. The second is alcohol. There is nothing in a university employee's scope of work that includes the consumption of alcohol. If you choose to drink alcohol at an event, you surrender all authority and insurance protection that is afforded to you through our insurer. If a claim were to arise from an event in which you drank alcoholic beverages, you may be held personally liable for damages. The next topic is property, which includes our buildings, our building contents, our equipment, and our informational technology assets. The university depends on these resources to accomplish its mission. Protecting this property ensures that it will continue to be available for our use. It is a violation of university and regents policy, as well as Georgia state law, to use state property for personal business. This includes, but is not limited to, such items as vehicles, equipment, laboratories, dumpsters, and IT resources. If you use university property for personal gain, you may be held liable if an incident were to occur. Typically, the risk is low, but it could prove catastrophic should someone get seriously injured. Additionally, permitting the use of facilities, vehicles, or equipment to a person or group is only extended to those that have the authority to do so. There are inherent risks in allowing persons to use our property, and there are safeguards in place to manage these risks.
It's understood that everyone at UWG will from time to time use a university resource for personal business. It would be impractical to expect every employee to refrain from responding to a personal phone call or to limit their web use to only what's applicable to their job. The law and policy do not go into detail. Employees should use their best judgment, and if there's any question in their mind as to whether something is inappropriate, they should ask their supervisor.
The university's property is insured under our property program, but it carries a deductible which will need to be absorbed by the responsible department. Most risks are covered, but there are a few in which the university will have to absorb all of the costs. Among the scenarios in which our property is not protected by our insurance is if we cause or contribute to the damage ourselves. An example is if we're filling a container with water and we abandon it and it floods the building. It would not be an insured loss. Another example is if we attempt to bypass electrical safeguards and it starts a fire. That would be an uninsured loss as well. Another case in which we would be completely responsible for the loss is if we fail to secure the property. stolen university property is only insured if 1. If the stolen items were secured properly, and 2. If there is a sign of forced entry. The informal motto is, if it ain't secured, it ain't insured. If the property was not properly secured when it was stolen, insurance will not cover the loss. Historically, the university has lost thousands of dollars in laptops and projectors simply because someone did not lock the door. Speaking of laptops, you should be aware that they pose both a property and liability risk if stolen. You should be extremely careful with storage media that contains personal data, such as social security numbers, financial information, and dates of birth. A single file could cost thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if the information was used for identity theft. The first rule is that if you don't need it, get rid of it. There are only a few departments that actually need this information. The second rule is to secure and minimize. If you have to have it on your computer, only keep it on for as long as you need it. Encrypt the data and store the media in a secured location. Finally, by law, the state can only insure its own property. Personal property is not covered under the university's insurance policy. Employees assume the risk if they bring their own property on campus. This is different from a typical homeowner's policy, and many people learn this only when their property is damaged. If you have books, tools, equipment, or other valuables, you're advised to call your personal insurance agent and make sure they are covered under your own policies. The next topic is emergency response. Only a few people on campus are emergency responders, but we all have the duty to report to emergencies and respond appropriately. All employees should have a general knowledge on what to do should an emergency occur. First things first, you should not dial 911 for an on-campus emergency. Instead, call the university police at 678-839-6000. Dispatch will ensure that emergency responders have the necessary information to respond promptly. Calling 911 could result in delayed emergency response for two reasons. First, the 911 operator will not automatically know where you are calling from, and second, they may not know how to get to where you are. Every employee should be familiar with general emergency procedures. If the fire alarm goes off in your building, you should exit immediately and proceed to the evacuation assembly point. Most occupied buildings have this location identified in their fire evacuation plans. Another emergency procedure that we can typically expect is a tornado warning. Most buildings have a designated high-wind refuge area. When prompted by university police or through the voice alarm system, you should proceed to your building's protected area and remain there until cleared. If you do not hear an all-clear notification or subsequent warning, you may leave after 45 minutes. If you are outside when the alarm goes off, immediately seek shelter indoors. If you can't, crouch in a low-lying area. The worst place to be during a tornado is in your car. Finally, we encourage all who work and study at the University of West Georgia to subscribe to the Schoolcast Emergency Notification System. This service allows you to be notified in the event of an emergency via your cell phone, text message, landline, or email. It will also provide you with pertinent information, such as institution closings. You can sign up for Schoolcast through the University Police's website. We're going to spend a few minutes on injuries and workers' compensation. As an employee, you are entitled to medical care if you are injured on the job. But there are still some factors that would void your claim and some responsibilities that rest with you. An injury or illness is determined as work-related if it arises out of the course of employment. Some injuries that may not be covered include pre-existing conditions, horseplay, fighting, and those that occur when the employee is involved in an activity that is outside the scope of his or her employment. Like all emergencies, you should contact university police if immediate assistance is needed for an injury or transportation is likely to be required. For other work-related injuries that may require a prompt but not immediate response, you should report your injury to your supervisor and notify risk management. Remember that all work-related injuries and illnesses must be reported to the supervisor as required by law. Failure to do so may void any compensation entitlement under the workers' compensation law. A job-related injury is a condition or illness that arises in the course of a worker's duty. If injured, a first report of injury form must be filled out and submitted to the supervisor for review. The form can be found online on the RMEHS website. It is the injured person's responsibility to fill out the form. It is the supervisor's responsibility to forward the completed form to RMEHS. Please remember that the University Health Center is funded by student fees and is only available for students. With the exception of blood pressure checks and efforts that benefit the campus community, treatment of any kind for employees is prohibited at the university's Health Service Center. Finally, 2 notes on workers' compensation. An employee may be asked to submit to a drug test following an on-the-job injury. If an employee unjustifiably refuses to submit to drug testing, workers' compensation may be denied. If a work-related injury is treated at the emergency room, a drug test will automatically be taken during this visit. Secondly, the law states that if an employee is found guilty of filing a false claim, he or she shall be guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction shall be punished by a fine of not more than $10,000 or imprisonment up to 12 months or both. Environmental compliance and chemical safety. With its print shops, art studios, maintenance efforts, and chemical labs, the university uses a host of chemicals and materials to accomplish its objectives. Chances are, if you are involved in chemical-specific processes, you will be required to take specific training, which we won't address in this module. This section provides information that all university employees should know. Under the Georgia Right to Know Act, employees have the right to know about the hazards of chemicals and materials that they may use and/or may come in contact with. The Georgia Department of Labor has mandated that all state employees be trained in basic right to know awareness each year, which is available through the Board of Regents website. This act also requires that material safety data sheets, or MSDS, which outline the hazards of a chemical, be available to all employees. The MSDS also contains information regarding the chemical's safe use and disposal. Every department, shop, or section that uses hazardous materials must have an MSDS for each of the chemicals on inventory. If you're not familiar with the location of the MSDS, contact your supervisor. If you're part of an administrative unit, chances are that you will not have an MSDS file, but you will still be required to take the Right to Know training each year. In the eyes of the regulatory agencies, the university is a business and thus has more stringent restrictions on its waste. Some of the things that you can throw away at home, you cannot simply toss out on campus. We'll mention a few examples. Spent fluorescent light bulbs contain mercury and are considered hazardous waste. Employees should submit a work order to have these items picked up so they can be disposed of properly. Additionally, rechargeable batteries may be regulated under environmental laws, and you should follow the same procedure. Regular alkaline batteries no longer contain any significant hazardous materials, and you can simply discard these in the regular trash. Spray cans contain compressed and possibly flammable gases. They too must be disposed of as hazardous waste. Contact risk management to have these picked up. Inkjet printer cartridges and fuser cores are not regulated, but should be mailed back to the manufacturer or turned in to RMEHS.
Most importantly, if someone has an item to dispose of and they're not sure how to dispose of it, they should ask their supervisor or contact risk management. Simply not knowing the law is not a defense. Employees can and will be held personally liable if they break the law when it comes to environmental compliance.
Safety is what most people think of when they think of risk management. We have a duty to protect our employees, visitors, and students, not just because it reduces a liability or operational risk, but because it is the right thing to do. Simply put, each time someone gets hurt, it is a failure to some degree, and there may be costs on many levels. Everyone is a safety manager. Safety encompasses a whole realm of topics, most of which are included in our comprehensive loss control manual. In the interest of time, we'll only address a few issues that relate to the general campus population. The first is fire safety. An employee shall not permit stairwell and fire doors to be propped unless they are working in the general area and need the door to be open. Stairwell doors, in particular, are designed to be self-closing to contain the smoke and fire. If there is an operational need to keep a fire door open for more than just an incidental occurrence, you should first seek permission with risk management. Secondly, materials, equipment, and tools should not be placed in any component of a building's path to safety, including stairwells, hallways, doors, and sidewalk. The Life Safety Code is complicated and dependent on a host of factors, so always check with risk management before installing furniture in the hallway. And finally, with a few exceptions, such as food warming canisters, candles and any other open flames are prohibited in campus buildings unless approved by risk management. This is one of the few risks on campus that is managed by avoidance. Candles do not satisfy the risk-benefit equation, and banning them reduces fire risk significantly. With general safety, it is the responsibility of the department to properly train its employees. Similarly, it is the responsibility of the employee to refrain from using equipment or performing tasks if they have not been trained. Injuries, property damage, and liability claims may result from performing tasks without adequate training. Additionally, every employee has the right to request equipment that would make their job or environment safer. One of the major causes of injuries is due to slips, trips, and falls. Like all other potentially hazardous conditions, if you see a situation that could cause someone to fall, you are responsible for either correcting the condition, notifying your supervisor, or turning in a work order as a corrective action. If you caused a spill, or even if you simply notice it, please clean it up or arrange to have it cleaned. Talk to your custodian about putting out a sign, or install your own if you can't address the spill immediately. Don't assume that people will see the spill and avoid it, as more and more individuals are distracted by texting or accessing the web or email on their cell phones. Ladders should be used with care. Any ladder that is in disrepair should be disposed of properly. The top rung and platform should never be used as a step. Employees should avoid overreaching, but instead get down and reposition the ladder. Please also note that our employees have been injured when they've climbed on their desks or used a chair as a footstool. If you need to change out a light bulb or deflect an air vent, please submit a work order so that a technician can do this safely. Back injuries can be prevented by using proper lifting techniques. These techniques include getting assistance, employing material handling equipment, such as a cart or hand truck, and/or reducing the size and/or quantity of packaged material. Accidents sometimes result from faulty or failing equipment. It is the responsibility of all employees to report equipment that is malfunctioning. This concludes the topic-specific training. There are just a few more things to discuss, things that all employees should know. The University of West Georgia has an acceptable use policy, which pertains to computer and network use. It is the responsibility of every employee who may use a university computer or network to be familiar with this policy. Essentially, This document contains the parameters in which you may or may not use our institution's IT resources. Topics include access, appropriate use, privacy, intellectual rights, harassment, password sharing, and disruptions of service. This policy can be found on the web at policy.westga.edu. There are two distilled principles in the acceptable use policy. State computers are to be used for state business, and it is the responsibility of all users to protect the integrity of our systems. By state law, you are prohibited from sharing your network password with anyone. If you feel this password has been compromised, you are required to report it immediately to the IT help desk. Another miscellaneous topic is smoking. In accordance with the Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act of 2005, persons are prohibited from smoking within 25 feet of any building entrance or air intake. It is up to our entire community to remind people where they can smoke. Additionally, a word should be mentioned on ID cards and keys, which most people receive at the start of their employment. Lost keys and swipe cards represent a property and public safety risk to the university. If you've lost your university keys or your swipe card, you are responsible for reporting this to your supervisor as soon as practical. There are two more pertinent laws which apply to your employment at UWG. The first is the Drug-Free Workplace Policy, and the second is the Weapons Policy. Both can be found at the University Police website. Unless special permission is given by the Chief of Police, it is a violation of Georgia law to bring any type of weapon into university buildings. For a clarification of what weapons are, please consult the law. As a recipient of federal funds, University of West Georgia supports and complies with the provisions of the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. Institutional policy prohibits the unlawful manufacture, distribution, dispensation, possession, or use of illegal drugs by employees of the University of West Georgia. As an employee, it is a condition of your employment that you both A. abide by the university's policy on controlled substances, and B. inform the university of any conviction for violation of a criminal drug statute which occurs in the workplace within 5 days after such conviction.
There are basic principles at work here. We should, as an institution, strive to do the right thing at all times. The acts or omissions of one person can have a corporate impact. Ethics, risk management, solid academic practices, solid business practices, they go hand in hand. They can strengthen one another and they can weaken one another. If anyone is concerned about something they've learned or discovered, they are accountable on behalf of the entire institution to address that concern. There should be no reprisals for doing the right thing.
Just one more thing. As stated, you are encouraged to work out any concerns you have through your chain of command. There are also other offices on campus that can address your concerns as well, but if you feel that there are inappropriate acts being conducted and you are not comfortable with resolving these through the normal channels, the University of West Georgia subscribes to a 24-hour hotline that will protect your identity. Please remember that this hotline is intended for dishonest or unethical behavior only. The phone number and website address are at the bottom of this screen.
This concludes our training. We'd welcome any feedback. If you have any suggestions or comments, please call us, email us, or stop by the Risk Management Office. I'd like to thank you for your participation, and I'd like to thank you for your contributions to the university campus.